Greetings collectors and welcome to today's retro game review. It's part 10 of this Gauntlet mini-series. Welcome to the Gauntlet. This series has explored the classic era, the Legends era, and the modern era of Gauntlet gaming. You join us at the very end of our quest together, which ironically looks to understand the very origins of Gauntlet itself. Now, strictly speaking, what I told you in part 1 of the series was correct. Gauntlet did first originate in arcades back in 1985 from Atari, but there was a small piece of the story that I intentionally left out. It's now time to go deeper than ever into the Gauntlet origin story. It's a story that spans all the way back to 1982 and a university thesis of all things. In 1982, John Palovich was studying at MIT, preparing his thesis of terror. His thesis regarded an experimental idea for a 5-player computer game. 4 players would use Atari 800 computers acting as graphical terminals, and a 5th player acting as a dungeon master on a second linked machine. The 5th player was never fully realised, so the concept was dialed back to 4 players. It's said that the concept of the game was heavily influenced by Palovich's experience of watching his fellow dorm mates playing Dungeons & Dragons. Indeed, you can see the influence flow through to most of the early Gauntlet games. After graduating from MIT, Palovich went on to work for Atari's research division, mostly on graphics and sound chips. However, he continued to work on the thesis of terror concept to develop it further. By May of 1983, the original code was reworked for release. During this time, the game also finally became to be known as Dandy, a near phononym of D&D. D&D, D&D, Dandy. You can see what happened there. Dandy was a decent game and clear to anyone watching this video that many of the major elements of a Gauntlet game can be seen in here. It's worth remembering that Dandy followed the formula of collecting keys to open locked doors, treasure, bombs, health and dungeons. In the original release print, you also play as, believe it or not, Thor, the Norwegian mother that you don't mess with. Now, what are the chances just 2 years later in 1985 that one of Gauntlet's protagonists is called, yes you guessed it, Thor? That's right, just 2 years later after the release of Dandy, in 1985 Atari themselves went on to release the smash hit Gauntlet, a project led by Ed Logand, said to have been directly inspired by Dandy, a project that Palovich was not directly involved in. With Ed Logand credited as the creator of Gauntlet, there was controversy brewing at Atari even in these early days. After Gauntlet's release, Palovich threatened a lawsuit, insisting that the original concept for Gauntlet was based on Dandy, written by himself in 1983. The dispute was eventually settled without a suit being filed, with Atari Games doing business as Tengen allegedly awarding Palovich a Gauntlet game machine. However, Palovich's original concept for the game could have made him millions had history been a little different. Here, I have the original Spectrum and Commodore 64 releases of Dandy. The Commodore 64 version credits software by the Ram Jam Corporation and based on an original design by John H. Palovich. The Spectrum edition, on the other hand, only credits Palovich. It's clear from playing the game that Dandy was not just a precursor to Gauntlet. By any other name, it is Gauntlet. It may not be so fluid, but there is a clear injustice that Palovich's name is often left out of conversations when Gauntlet is discussed. However you may feel about this turn of events, it's worth knowing that Palovich did see some redemption as he continued to refine Dandy. By 1987, a reworked concept was released as Dark Chambers, which was available on the Atari 2600 and 7800. This time with Palovich appropriately credited with all rights reserved. And here is an original pressing of Dark Chambers for the 2600. I have to say that the artwork is really special. The treasure, the heroes, the ghosts and death, it's just a really well crafted piece. The back of the box explains the main idea of the game and promises about as much as a 2600 game could at the time. The game comes with the all-important cartridge and a rather excellent manual. It explains the potions, keys, bombs, as well as several other pickups not found in the Gauntlet series. Looking at the character list though, you see skeletons, wizards, spawners, poisons, and grim reapers. For all the world, this could be the prototype document for the Gauntlet formula. The 2600 edition of the game is rather decent. It's basic, but for an Atari 2600 game, still remarkably playable. The 7800 version is perhaps even better due to the levels of detail, and definitely fulfills all of the prerequisites of the classic era of Gauntlet game. So, what can we take away from all of this? On one hand, it's a shame that Palovich doesn't always receive the credit he deserves when the subject of Gauntlet arises. Let's face it, Atari may have put out the Gauntlet series, but the original implementation of the idea was clearly his. With Dandy and Dark Chambers being published, it's clear that Palovich had the right concepts and skills for most to credit him with the underlying mechanics of the franchise. Financially, he must have felt hard done by, and there's probably not a lot that anyone can do at this point in time. However, we can admire his creativity and vision, which hopefully goes some way to giving him the credit he deserves. As for the Gauntlet series itself, it has a fascinating lineup of entries, has spanned several decades, and managed to engage with several generations of gamer. The classic games now appear regularly in compilation packs, and modern studios still reap the benefits from its legacy. Gauntlet also helps tell the historical battles of game licensing between Atari and Nintendo, the creation of Tengen, and helps plot the fortunes of Atari itself over time. Its license may have been passed around over the years, but Gauntlet is such a strong concept that it has managed to weather the bad times and continues to delight us. No matter whether you collect Atari, Nintendo, Sega, Commodore, PC or other, at some point the dark dungeons of the Gauntlet are sure to have been part of your gaming journey at some point in time. On a personal level, Gauntlet 2 for the Commodore Amiga will always be my favourite in the series, as it was so groundbreaking. But other entries in the series, such as Gauntlet 4, really did go all out to thrill fans of the hack and slash genre. However, there's many varied entries in the series over many different console types, over many different eras, so there's definitely something in here for everyone. I'd like to thank you all for sticking around for this special 10-part series of Gauntlet, and hopefully you've enjoyed the journey into the dungeons with me. Let me know in the comments your favourite Gauntlet game and why, as there's a lot to choose from. Until next time, happy questing and happy gaming.